Black people represent about 14% of the population, but only 2% of employer firms. If the share of employer firms matched the population, we would have 800,000 more businesses in the United States.
Looking for the ultimate conversation on Black innovation and wealth creation?
Look no further. From Chains to Links brings together some of the top Black entrepreneurs, academics, creatives, and futurists
To discuss how we reimagine Black community.
and build a collective vision for true Black prosperity.
So get ready. We're about to go there. Hey everybody, welcome back to From Chains to Links. I am Kelly Burton, co-host for this fantastic podcast. My partner in crime, Ifike, is not going to be able to join us today, but we're going to hold it down. I am joined by an amazing brother who has built a fantastic body of work over his career, and so excited to hear his perspective, especially given our work at Black Innovation Alliance is all about closing the racial wealth gap. So this brother is going to help to drop some gems to inform our movement in that direction. So welcome, Andre Perry. Thank you for
Kelly.
joining us. Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
It's always a struggle for a black man in America, but I'm surviving.
You surviving and looking good while doing it,
You
too.
know,
You
I tried to
know?
match the
I'm
furniture.
telling you, we appreciate that. So tell us what has you in D.C. Well, do you live in D.C. or you?
I live in the DMV. I
Really?
live in the National Harbor. But this is Congressional Black Caucus weekend.
It is.
So we get to hang out with all the muckety mucks.
mucks. And
You
muckety
know,
mucks. I call
all,
them the blue blood black people.
exactly. The 5-button suits and all the fanciness. No, but it's a good time because you really get to see why we should be gathering. Because if we're not talking about the importance of economic and political power,
Yes.
then what are we really talking about? And
Yes.
so we need this event. They are our representatives, and we need to help them understand what the Black agenda is, and that's what that's why I'm here this weekend. But I live in the area, work in the area,
Live and work in the area.
play in the area.
Yeah, so you're at the Brookings Institute.
Yes, the Brookings Institution.
Yes, institution. They made that shift like a decade ago, right? And I'm still a little slow.
Yeah, well, I mean, and then you can call us Brookings.
Brookings for shorts.
Yeah.
Let's stick with that. That keeps it simple.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's a very prestigious appointment. So shout out to you, brother, because you have earned it. You've been hard at it for a long time. And so
Yeah.
it's good to see you in that role representing.
Yeah, I understand. We met years ago
Yes.
when I was doing some work at the Joint Center on a project called Place Matters, where we were looking at life expectancy by zip code.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because now I do a project that's called the Black Progress Index, where we look at where Black people are living the longest. So looking where
Interesting.
the highest life expectancy in cities and counties all across the country. So instead of looking at the Black-white disparity, we look at we compare Black people to Black people in different places.
So is this like this new blue zones concept?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Blue zones for Black people.
Absolutely, yeah. And you know what's interesting that we find that there's a big range where between Black people who are living well into their 80s. If there is a Wakanda, it is the DMV. In America, there's a Wakanda of sorts. In general,
Yeah.
life expectancy is higher. There's certainly some spots where it's not, but home ownership is generally higher. One of the biggest predictors of life expectancy, believe it or not, are the share of immigrants, Black immigrants in your area, and others, education, income. But so it's great just to look at where we're doing well, because that's in general my project at Brookings. I lead a team called the Valuing Black Assets Initiative, where we try to measure the assets in Black communities. The point being is that many of our assets are strong, but the value is extracted by structural racism.
Yes, 100%.
So that's what I do at Brookings.
One of the one of our big beliefs at Black Innovation Alliance is that when it comes to wealth creation, there are two big wealth creators around the world. We talk about capital W wealth, and that's inheritance and entrepreneurship.
Oh, absolutely.
Typically people with a lot of money, when you get to the top 10 list, you don't get there through home ownership. You get there because you inherited it, or you've built a business, or you run a business that is making millions, billions, trillions of dollars, right? I think about my experience in home ownership. I live in a lovely home. It's in Southwest Atlanta, but if you took my house and you put it on the back of a truck and you moved it 20 miles northeast, it would be worth 3, 4, 5 times as much.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
And so, talk to me a little bit. I would love to learn more about the premise of the book that you recently put
Know
out.
Your Price.
Know Your Price.
Valuing Black Lives and Property in America's Black Cities.
Yes.
Available wherever fine books are sold.
So what's the thesis of the book?
Yeah, it gets back to what I talked about, that our assets are much more valuable than their price. 2018, my colleague Jonathan Rothwell and I set out to explore home values in Black communities compared to white communities. And a lot of this started from me going back to my hometown in Pittsburgh, well, actually Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania, small municipality surrounded by Pittsburgh on 3 sides. And I went home, and the home was dilapidated, roof bowed, infrastructure, the foundation about to crumble. Looked at the list price, it was worth about $15,000. But the home was worth so much more to me. As the story was told to me, before I was born, this woman by the name of Elsie Boyd made a deal with my maternal grandmother that she would take me into this home, 1320. Wow. At the time, my mother was poor. She already had a child at 15, had me at 17. She probably was abused. And my father was a heroin addict. He was in and out of prison. He was murdered inside of a prison outside of Detroit. Wow. So Mom did what a lot of Black matriarchs did at the time when families were troubled. She took in children. And I was one of the kids. My brothers came along. She reared about 12 to 15 kids.
Wow.
And so the home just emotionally, physically should be worth a lot more. And so I just started exploring this issue. And so I said, let's compare our home to homes in other neighborhoods, because Pittsburgh and many places are struggling.
Yes.
So we did that at a national level. We compared homes in Black neighborhoods where the share of the population, Black population, 50% or higher, to those where the share of the Black population is 1% or less. And we controlled for, meaning we attended to education, crime, walkability, all those fancy Zillow metrics, so we could get an apples to apples comparison. And what we found pretty much astounds, that homes in Black neighborhoods are underpriced by 23%, about $48,000 per home. Cumulatively, there's about $156 billion in lost equity in Black neighborhoods. And I always put that in perspective so that people can wrap their heads around it.
And just because they're Black, because like you said, you control for all other factors. Because somebody would say, well, how about the quality of the schools? Or how about the quality of this and the infrastructure? And
we control for
all of that.
Neighborhood amenities, education, crime, walkability, number of restaurants. And
the percentage of Black people is the driving.
The percentage of Black people in the area. And $156 billion we should have in the place. And I put this in perspective. $156 billion would have financed more than 4 million Black-owned businesses based upon the average amount Black people use to start their firms. Would have paid for more than 8 million four-year degrees based upon the average amount of a 4-year public education. Replaced the pipes in Flint, Michigan 3,000 times over. It would have covered all of Hurricane Katrina damages, double the annual economic burden of the opioid crisis. This is a big number.
Wow.
And this is why I say, like it keeps my teeth white, that there's nothing wrong with Black people that ending racism can't solve. When things go wrong in Black communities, we blame Black people.
Yes.
We say, it's everything from their pants are sagging to the school. They're not getting an education. They're lazy.
They don't want to work.
But wealth and opportunities are extracted without anyone carrying a tiki torch, wearing a white hood. That this is the wealth that we use to lift ourselves up by our proverbial bootstraps.
Yes.
So that's the premise of my book. So it starts off with housing, but guess what? Our businesses
are undervalued.
Our educational institutions are much more valuable than they are priced. Our political infrastructure. And so that's why I take a very asset-based approach. It's, we need to assume that what we're doing is as good, if not better. Yeah, we have some, like the 23% difference. There's still education, crime.
Yes.
These things are still a problem and still a drag.
Right.
But they're not to the extent, it's almost like in that study, it's almost like when you look at a black neighborhood and you look at the price, it's as if crime is twice as bad than it actually is. Education is twice as worse than it actually is. And so, we need to back off of blaming black folk.
Right.
And I'm all for accountability.
Right.
All for it. I'm all for telling people, reason why I talk about entrepreneurship, because it is a form of self-determination.
Yes.
And whether or not you believe in a system that supports entrepreneurship, it is a manifestation of your effort,
yes,
of your doing.
Yes.
So I support that. But we got to get off this notion that the state of Black America is because of us. That a lot of our celebrities, a lot of our rappers, a lot of our, they buy into that.
Yeah. You talking about Charles Barkley? I'm just kidding.
Oh,
that's the most recent. That's the most recent
one
that I,
Oh, I can shame a lot of our folks we go.
Wax poetic on that.
Yeah.
One of the underlying arguments for the Supreme Court justices who carried the vote was that we live in a race-neutral society. And research like yours proves over and over and over again that while race-neutral might be the aspiration, it is not our reality.
Right.
So how do we get over this hump where now we're supposed to believe we live in a race-neutral society when we have, proven over and over and over again that racism is alive and well and has real life implications for people of color every single day, especially Black people?
Well, I answer it this way because I've talked a lot about the Supreme Court decisions, and remember that most of American history, it was legal to discriminate.
Yes.
Legal to discriminate.
Yes.
So hearing what the court feels about us is nothing new.
That's right.
Nothing new.
That's right.
We still have to keep pressing on.
That's right.
And from a legal standpoint, we still have to understand that there is an argument. What do you do with a population that's been discriminated against, regardless of your race or ethnicity? You still have to deal with injury. When 9/11 victims were injured.
Right.
I'm not getting a conversation about reparations, but just to make the point.
Right.
When 9/11 victims are injured, we found resources.
Right.
When businesses had to shutter for the pandemic because of our social distancing, we found the resources.
Right.
Now, there was another type of social distancing that occurred for generations. We should find the resources. And now, this what drives me nuts about these conversations, because I don't always make economic cases for equity, but because there's a moral imperative.
Sure.
I don't want to ever, but there is an economic issue here. Black people represent about 14% of the population, but only 2% of employer firms. If the share of employer firms matched to the population, we would have 800,000 more businesses in the United States. Millions of people hired. Trillions added to the economy.
Yes.
GDP increases. Innovation.
Yes.
Like, we cut our nose, well, not we, because I don't put myself in that camp, but there's a lot of people who cut their nose to spite their face every single day in the name of white supremacy or whatever they want, merit or whatever they want to call it.
Right.
But we still have to understand that we got to keep pressing on. Yeah. One of the studies I'm proud of is on business development. We scraped all the Yelp data from businesses all across the country. And then we did, again, controlling for spending power, education, all of that. And we found that Black, brown, and Asian-owned firms actually score as high, if not higher, on Yelp than their white counterparts.
In terms of quality of the
experience. Terms of quality. However, they get lower scores and less revenue when they're situated in Black neighborhoods. So the perception of the neighborhood is influenced the perception of the business. Why that's problematic? Because one, if you're a quality business, you should be rewarded as such. When you're not, you're forcing high quality businesses to compete with low quality businesses. Yes. You're getting less revenue. But more importantly, our elders had a saying for this. They would say, our ice is just as cold. Our ice is just as cold. It holds up empirically.
So are you saying that we do not live in a meritocracy? Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, no, we do not. I mean, that's pretty clear. But the thing is, that hasn't stopped us from being our best. The work that I do today is a result of many researchers who are a lot better than me doing that work 30, 40 years ago. And I get to wear nice, fancy suits, sit on luxurious couches.
That match your suit,
that match my suit. Because someone put in the work. Yes. They put in the work.
Yes.
And we got to put in the work.
So can we talk about that a little bit? Because when you came in, you mentioned you're here because our legislators need help in building a Black agenda.
Yes.
And I remember 20 years ago, this was actually a common idea, a concept, a Black agenda. I remember growing up, there was a Black slate that was delivered to your house. And the Black slate told you all the people you needed to vote for based on who was stomping for Black people. And all of those institutions, whether it's Black agenda or Black slates, they've gone away, or if they haven't gone away, they're under the radar. So what do we need to do to get back to a place where everybody got the hymnal and everybody know when we say turn to page 23, this is what it means and this is how we need to show up?
Well, I blame myself for this. I include myself. There was a time where in the community you had to prove you were a credit. And in the research community, to prove your credit is to provide information in a way that people can consume and use in a way that will advance their conditions. We as a community of scholars and researchers, we have got to come together, work through whatever differences and agendas are personal agendas, and actually create that slate.
Yes.
To create the space. It might be during the CBC. It might be once a year. You have the Urban League putting out stuff. You have NAACP putting out. I mean, with that stated, we do need an agenda that people can hold. That people can that is vetted.
Yes.
Because not everything, it holds up.
Well, these days, if you have a social media, profile and you've got 100,000, 200,000, 1 million followers, what you say holds more credence in the African-American community than what's coming out of the ivory tower.
That's right.
So when I graduated with my PhD, I decided that I was not going to stay in the academy because I had the same tension to say, I got in this work because I wanted to give back to the community. And being in the ivory tower, it makes it very difficult to do that. You have done a yeoman's job of it because you still stay very connected to the people and on the ground. But it's very, very difficult for academics to kind of permeate the ivory tower. And similarly with a lot of our legacy Black organizations, they struggle, and I'm going to say it. And, a lot of, we all know that it's a touchy subject, but the infrastructure that we had during the civil rights movement, and even 20 years ago, when direct mail mattered, when direct mail mattered, not to say direct mail don't matter, it don't matter as much as it mattered 20 years ago.
Right.
We haven't figured out how we build the digital infrastructure that allows us to do just that, right? To reach all 60 million or however million Black people there are out there, because somebody is doing it. Amazon is doing it, right?
Yeah, we're getting
TikTok is doing it. Facebook is doing it. X is doing it. How do we figure that out? How do we build the infrastructure? Not only build the agenda, because there are a lot of brilliant people that if you bring them together over a weekend, they can hash that out. But it's about the deployment of it.
I actually think we have the infrastructure. I actually think we have the people to do it. There are times when things do come together. I mean, I don't want to discount what 2020 did for us. Not that it solved everything, but we were generally on the same page on a lot of things. But it showed you how difficult it is to sustain something.
Yes.
Over time, because certainly the anger won't sustain.
That's right.
At some point, you have got to also have institutions that and practices that sustain the emotion. And so, for me, I want as a researcher to create those mechanisms. But I mean, I will say that over the course of, I've been at Brookings 6 years, I've had significant impact largely because I can connect with organizations, do things like this, stay grounded, and it adds value to people's lives. So, but I will say this about our Black institutions. They are treated like Black people. And so many of our HBCUs, for instance, a report just came out that showed the systemic under resourcing of our state institutions. And so there's a lack of resource there, not because of us. And so we got to figure out new ways to increase wealth of our institutions so we can do the kinds of activities that we need to do. So it's again, it's hard work. We got to keep pressing on. But I'm encouraged. I mean, I'm not, I don't fall in the Afro-pessimistic camp.
Is that a camp?
Oh, man.
Afro-pessimism?
Oh, man, it's more than a camp. I mean,
it's a movement.
It's a movement. I believe that, I look to the doers for hope.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people doing it. And again, like I said, any success that I have is really predicated on somebody else. Somebody else's smaller success, or failure.
Yeah.
And so we got to keep that perspective that this is a long range game, and not just in America. Like, we got to go to antiquity to understand that Pharaoh let my people go type of thing. This is not like a 400-year struggle. So when you put it into context, what Black people have done in the last 50 years is nothing short of remarkable.
Yes.
So
Agreed.
So we're nowhere near where we need to be.
Yeah.
So, but I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged.
So what are you on your soapbox about these days? What really gets under your skin? What every time you get a chance to rail about it?
Well, I'm okay. I'm going to stick on housing, because, and for the viewers, this might sound a little wonky, but you're going to get what you get.
Yeah, you're going to get what you get.
About a year and a half, Freddie and Fannie started including rental payments in their underwriting practices. And why is that important? Because it enables banks to create mortgages where you don't necessarily need a down payment because you can back it up with a rental property. And so there is these what they call special purpose credit programs that you can create new mortgage products that we don't have to say give a black person a special mortgage. If you have pay your rent on time, you can qualify for these mortgages. And why also was important that Freddie and Fannie and included in the underwriting practices, now the banks can sell these mortgages on the secondary market. I didn't want to get too.
That makes me nervous. Anytime anybody talk about secondary market, because that makes me think of 2008.
You're right, but no, okay, you're right. But why this is different?
Right.
This is completely different. You're talking about these prime borrowers, these folks who are doing everything right. Yeah. Before they were essentially giving out mortgages to a lot of people who didn't necessarily qualify. Now we're saying let's give mortgages to people, to invisible prime borrowers. Yeah. All those people who live in these markets. If you live in D.C. and you're paying rent, you can afford a mortgage. Yeah. And if you're paying rent 3 years, 5 years in a row, you can afford a mortgage. You just need a product that matches your situation. Yeah. Because this is the thing that is a reality. Black people didn't get, you mentioned earlier, with black people, a lot of black people didn't get the intergenerational wealth transfer. Because if your grandfather home to home, you might have a down payment.
Right. Right.
So if you don't, you could scrimp and scrawl and do all those things and not get a down payment, do everything right. So we need products that recognize
merit.
True merit. True merit. And not merit because of what your grandfather got.
Because that's aristocracy, not a meritocracy.
That's right.
Right. Yeah.
But, we can create new... I call it this, how I describe it. There's this architecture of inequality. And we got to dismantle that. We need a new architecture that allows for people who could not participate in markets fully to participate.
Well, can we talk about the new products piece on the business side? Because what is a hot topic in our space today is venture funding and venture capital. You saw the litigation directed towards the Fearless Fund. Black women receive 0.35% of venture funding. White men receive 96% of venture funding. Yeah. And to be clear, most startups, most businesses are not a good fit for venture. So in so many different ways, one could argue VC ain't for black people.
Right.
But the other option is debt-based, and lending and banking, and there are but so many products out there for black businesses, and a lot of them are predatory.
Yeah.
So are you seeing any bright light on the product side when it comes to business in similar ways that you're exploring it on the housing side?
Not in that way. Yeah. I would say that I have to remain hopeful for venture capital. There's a brother, Nazir Quadri of Zeal Capital. There's an organization called Known that fashions itself as sort of the BlackRock for people of color.
Ah, yes.
And it's financial. BlackRock is a big financial.
Yes, I was about to say BlackRock for black. I don't know. It's complicated.
But by and large, when it comes to venture capital, it is such a small percentage of funding for all businesses. I mean, it represents a small. With that said, if there was take a big bet on something, I say take a big bet on the real underappreciated assets in our country, and that's black people. Meaning if you add water, it will grow. And they can't figure that out.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying all businesses get venture capital, as you mentioned. Not all businesses are built for venture.
Yeah.
But we do have tech firms that are their ice is just as cold.
Right.
And we got to compel, and you're going to get the outsized returns if you can just see that their ice is just as cold.
Well, thinking about black people as an asset makes me nervous because that's how we enter into this American as an asset, as the ultimate asset, as property, right?
And I mean that metaphorically, but
I was just giving you some insight into my internal, my guttural response.
You know, it's like when you see all these YouTube things about a high value man and all that. And I'm always like,
yikes, right? The buck, right? The buck, right.
But I try to go, okay, I know what you're trying to say.
I know. Well, you know, us nerdy types, we can overanalyze everything. I know that is my truth. And so I recognize it for what it is. But, you know, that is the underlying kind of theme of From Chains to Links, right? Yeah. What does it mean to go from being owned to being an owner? Yeah. Like, that is a mindset shift. And those are hard conversations that we as a people need to have, because there are some things that we're going to have to let go, some ways of being and doing that may have served us in the past that will not necessarily serve us moving forward. So how do we unpack that and do that work?
Well, I have always said that if America is going to be a true meritocracy, it will mean that black ownership rates are higher than other groups. Yeah. That's when you know, okay, something has changed. Yes. For that reason, we were the assets that were bought, sold, mortgaged. And so when you see that power shift, because we talk a lot about wealth and assets and things like that, but it's really about power. Yes. You know, how much power do you have? Yes. And entrepreneurship, ownership, home ownership, business ownership, commercial property ownership, these are just forms of power. Yes. And there's not one that we have to do, but we do need power. Yes. You know, so I'll just briefly mention, like on the home ownership front, I do believe that we need more home ownership. More importantly, we need stable, reliable, predictable places to live. Yes. That's more important. Yes. We've made it into like this wealth building thing, and it, you know, in this country it is, but you should be able to thrive without necessarily owning a home. You know, and so we should not commodify certain values. Yeah. And so for me, I want to always just remind it. I'm glad you brought up this whole asset conversation. For me, it's about power. Yeah. You know, what kind of power do we need and have? Because even on the home ownership front, that's a colonial idea. Yeah. This idea that your property rights determine not only your value, but how much control you have in a community. Well, you know, our democracy was created to protect white man's ability to preserve his property. That's right. That's right. Our country is not built on democracy. The founders, the framers, didn't care nothing about no democracy. And what I mean, in borrowing some of our Native American brothers out there, what if we all own? You know, what does the world look like in that perspective? But then we have to be stewards. That's right. That way, God forbid, we actually have to care for something and not extract. Exactly. Until it's completely dead. Exactly. Right. So. Thank you, Dr. Perry, so much for joining us. This conversation has woken me up and given me some fresh things to think about. I'm excited to dig into your book because I think it has a lot of implications for what we're trying to build at Black Innovation Alliance. So thank you for the time. Know your price. Know your price. Valuing Black lives and property in America's Black cities. Available wherever fine books are sold. Well, we know where we can find the book. Where can people find you? Oh, they can reach me at Andre Perry EDU on all social media platforms. And also, you can just reach out to Brookings Institution. Read the research. We got a ton of research that's really spine-tingling, really understandable tools that people can go online. So check out a brother and say his suits are nice.
That's right. And then match the couch.
That's right.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for joining us for another episode of From Chains to Links. We'll see you next time.
Hey, everybody. Hope you loved the episode as much as we did.
Join us at blackinnovationalliance.com to continue the conversation. And remember to subscribe, like,
and share the podcast as we continue to build the movement for true Black prosperity.